The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called for the third time in 2 standard cycles. Representatives from 47 different species filled the massive chamber on Nexus Prime, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony that the universal translators struggled to process. At the center of it all stood High Counselor Vex-High, a towering crystalline being whose light patterns flickered with obvious distress. Ambassador Keth Moore of the Hegemony rose from his seat, his 6 arms gesturing dismissively. The insectoid species had always been among the most aggressive in the galaxy, but even they had learned to respect the Council's authority over the millennia. Today, however, his mandibles clicked with obvious irritation. "Honored Council," Keth Moore began, his voice carrying the metallic undertone common to his species, "we gather once again to discuss these humans. A species that achieved faster-than-light travel merely 50 of their years ago. They have ignored 3 separate warnings, violated 17 different territorial agreements, and somehow managed to establish colonies in systems that should have been impossible for them to reach." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Veltar delegation, aquatic beings in their environmental suits, released bubbles that their translators converted to words of support. Even the peaceful Ethon, normally advocates for diplomatic solutions, seemed troubled by humanity's recent actions. High Counselor Vex-High's crystalline form pulsed with a deep blue light, indicating his attempt to maintain order. "The humans have been contacted through all standard diplomatic channels. They acknowledge our messages, but continue their expansion into contested space. Their response to our latest ultimatum was unusual." The massive holographic display in the center of the chamber activated, showing the recorded message from Earth's government. A middle-aged human woman appeared, dressed in the simple blue and white uniform that humans use for official communications. Her expression was calm, almost serene, as she delivered what many in the chamber considered the most audacious response in Council history. To the esteemed members of the Galactic Council, the human ambassador had said, "We thank you for your continued correspondence regarding our expansion activities. While we understand your concerns about territorial boundaries and established protocols, humanity must respectfully decline to cease our colonization efforts. Our people require space to grow, and we have identified numerous systems that, while technically claimed by your member species, remain uninhabited and unused. We see no logical reason to abandon our settlements when they bring no harm to existing populations." The recording continued, but the ambassador's next words had sent shockwaves through every species represented in the Council. "Furthermore, we must inform you that humanity will not be applying for membership in the Galactic Council at this time. We appreciate the invitation, but we prefer to maintain our independence. We hope this will not affect our future relationships, and we remain open to trade and cultural exchange on our own terms." When the message ended, the chamber erupted in outraged communication. The Hegemony delegation began clicking and chittering among themselves, while the proud Zephyrian Empire's representatives puffed out their feathered crests in obvious displeasure. Never before had a species so boldly rejected not just Council authority, but the invitation to join their ranks. Senator Golrath of the Void Runners, a species known for their military prowess, stood with his forearms crossed. His scarred carapace told the story of countless battles, and his gravelly voice cut through the noise. "These humans mock us with their words. They act as if the Council's authority means nothing. In my species' experience, there's only one way to deal with such insolence." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what the Void Runners were capable of. They had been the Council's enforcement arm for over 2,000 years, crushing rebellions and bringing rogue species into line. Their fleet was legendary, their warriors unmatched in conventional combat. High Counselor Vex-High's light patterns shifted to a warning yellow. "Senator Golrath, while your species' dedication to maintaining order is appreciated, we must consider all options. Humanity is still a young species. Perhaps they simply do not understand the consequences of defying Council authority." "They understand perfectly," interrupted Counselor Nixera of the Technical Guild, her mechanical voice carrying a note of analytical precision. Our intelligence networks have been monitoring human communications since their first FTL test. They know exactly what they're doing. Their military strategists have been studying every major conflict in recorded galactic history. They have detailed files on every council member species, including our military capabilities and historical responses to territorial disputes. This revelation sent another wave of disturbed communication through the chamber. The fact that humanity had been studying them was troubling enough, but the implications were far more concerning. Ambassador Kethmore's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. If they have been studying us, then they know that no species has ever successfully defied the Council for longer than a few cycles. They know what happened to the Korth Rebellion, to the Savage Worlds Alliance, to the Brotherhood of Stars. Every single species that chose confrontation over cooperation was brought to heel. Precisely, Senator Golrath agreed, his massive frame seeming to fill more space as his aggression built. Which means these humans are either incredibly foolish, or they believe they have some advantage that previous rebels lacked. Either way, they must be taught the same lesson as all the others. High Counselor Vexhai considered this for several long moments, his crystalline form cycling through various colors as he processed the situation. The Council had faced rebellions before, but never from species so young and yet so seemingly confident. Humanity's rapid technological advancement was concerning, but surely they could not match civilizations that had been refining their sciences for millennia. Very well, the High Counselor finally announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. We will proceed with standard enforcement protocols. The humans will be given one final ultimatum. Withdraw from all contested systems within 30 of their days, apply for provisional council membership, and submit to standard territorial arbitration. If they refuse, the enforcement fleet will be dispatched. The vote was swift and unanimous. Even the traditionally peaceful species voted in favor of enforcement action. Humanity's dismissive attitude had insulted not just the Council's authority, but the very principles upon which galactic civilization was built. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, many felt a sense of satisfaction. The young upstart species would soon learn their place in a galactic order. It would be an unfortunate but necessary lesson, one that would ultimately benefit both humanity and the galaxy as a whole. Senator Golrath remained behind, studying the tactical displays that showed human settlements throughout the contested regions. His experience, I noted their positioning, their defensive capabilities, and their apparent supply lines. Everything he saw confirmed his belief that this would be a swift campaign. Humanity had spread themselves thin across dozens of systems, a classic mistake that young species often made. Prepare the 3rd and 7th battle groups, he commanded his aide. Standard suppression loadout. We will make this quick and decisive. The sooner the humans learn their lesson, the sooner we can return to more pressing matters. What none of them realized as they made their plans and prepared their fleets was that humanity had been preparing as well. For 50 years, ever since that first successful FTL test, human scientists, strategists, and engineers have been working toward this exact moment. They had studied every Council enforcement action, analyzed every tactic, and identified every weakness in what the galaxy considered an unbeatable system. The humans had indeed been mocking the Council's warnings, but they had also been preparing to ensure that their defiance would carry a cost the galaxy had never imagined possible. Admiral Sarah Chan stood in the command center buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of Luna, watching as streams of data flowed across the massive holographic displays. The facility, officially designated as Solar Defense Command, had been humanity's best-kept secret for nearly 4 decades. While the galaxy believed humans were scattered and vulnerable across their various colonies, the truth was far different. "Ma'am, we're receiving the final ultimatum from the Galactic Council," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres, her fingers dancing across the quantum communication interface. 30 Earth days to withdraw from all contested systems and submit to Council authority. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. She was a veteran of the resource wars that had nearly destroyed Earth in the early 22nd century, and she understood better than most that sometimes strength was the only language that bullies understood. Patch it through to all station commanders and colony leaders. Make sure everyone knows what we're dealing with. The command center buzzed with quiet efficiency as personnel went about their tasks. Unlike the chaotic communication methods used by many galactic species, humans had developed a remarkably streamlined command structure based on their military history. Every person knew their role. Every system had redundant backups, and every plan had been tested through countless simulations. Dr. Marcus Webb, the chief scientist for the Terra Defense Initiative, approached the admiral with a datapad in hand. His expression was serious but confident. The final preparations are complete. All orbital platforms are armed and operational. The new stealth frigates have been deployed to their assigned positions, and the special project is ready for field testing. Admiral Chen nodded. The special project was humanity's ultimate insurance policy, something that had been in development since the first contact with galactic civilization. While other species had focused on traditional shipbuilding and conventional weapons, humanity had taken a different approach entirely. "What about our intelligence network?" the admiral asked. "Are we still receiving data from Council Space?" Commander Elena Vasquez, head of Human Intelligence Operations, stepped forward. She was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Our assets are still in place and transmitting regularly. The Council believes they have full information security, but they never anticipated our approach to espionage." The truth was that humanity had spent decades infiltrating galactic civilization, but not in the way most species expected. Instead of trying to place spies in government positions or military installations, humans had focused on becoming indispensable in everyday life. Human restaurants served food that dozens of species found irresistible. Human entertainment had become wildly popular across multiple star systems. Human trade goods were known for their reliability and innovation. What the galaxy didn't realize was that every human business, every entertainment venue, every trade ship was part of a vast intelligence network. A chef in a hegemony restaurant overheard military planning discussions. A musician performing for Zephyrian nobles learned about fleet deployments. A merchant trading with the Void Runners discovered their tactical doctrines and weapon specifications. "The Council fleet is assembling at Rally Point Nexus," Commander Vasquez continued. "Third and 7th battle groups, just as our analysis predicted. Senator Golrath is commanding personally, which confirms they view this as a standard enforcement action." Admiral Chun studied the tactical display showing the Council's force composition. It was impressive by any conventional standard. Over 200 capital ships, supported by thousands of smaller vessels. The Void Runner dreadnoughts alone carried enough firepower to reduce a planet's surface to molten slag. "They're following Doctrine 7, observed Colonel James Mitchell, the Command Center's chief tactical analyst. "Standard formation for suppressing a technologically inferior opponent. They'll establish blockades around our major colonies, demand surrender, and systematically reduce our defenses if we refuse to comply." "Which is exactly what we wanted them to do," Admiral Chen replied. "How long until they reach our outer systems?" 18 Earth days at their current speed, Torres reported. "They're not attempting to conceal their approach. Standard intimidation tactics." Admiral Chun activated the secure communication link to Earth's president and the Colonial Council. Within moments, the faces of humanity's leadership appeared on her screen. President Martinez looked older than his years, the weight of their civilization's future clearly visible in his expression. "Admiral Chen," the president began without preamble, "are we really ready for this? Once we commit to this course of action, there's no going back. The galaxy will never see humanity the same way again." "Mr. President," Admiral Chen replied, "we've been preparing for this moment since we first learned that galactic civilization was controlled by a council that brooks no dissent. We've studied their methods, their psychology, their weaknesses. We know what they're capable of, but, more importantly, we know what they're not capable of." She gestured to the tactical displays surrounding them. "The Council has maintained power for millennia through superior technology and overwhelming force. They crush resistance quickly and decisively, which discourages other species from challenging their authority. but they've never faced an opponent like humanity. President Martinez frowned. What makes us so different? We're still outnumbered thousands to one. Our colonies have maybe 50 million people total, spread across dozens of systems. They could blockade us into submission without even landing a single soldier. Dr. Webb stepped forward. Mr. President, if I may, the Council's approach to warfare is based on their understanding of how civilizations develop. Most species follow predictable patterns. They develop FTL travel, establish colonies, build defensive fleets, and eventually reach a technological plateau. The Council's enforcement doctrine is designed to overwhelm conventional defenses. He activated a holographic model showing human space. But we haven't followed conventional development patterns. While other species focused on building large fleets and fortified worlds, we've been developing what we call distributed defense networks. Every human colony, every space station, every asteroid mining operation is part of an integrated defense system. The hologram zoomed in to show details that would have shocked any Council strategist. Human colonies weren't just civilian settlements. They were fortress worlds with underground manufacturing facilities, orbital defense platforms, and long-range sensor networks. The asteroid mining operations weren't just extracting resources. They were building hidden supply depots and repair facilities throughout human space. Furthermore, Dr. Webb continued, we've been developing technologies that the Council has never encountered. While they were perfecting energy weapons and shield systems, we were exploring entirely different approaches to warfare. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. The Council expects us to fight like every other species they've encountered. They expect fleet actions, planetary sieges, and conventional tactics. They have no idea what we're actually capable of. Colonel Mitchell activated another display, showing the positions of Council forces as they move toward human space. Their formation is textbook perfect for conventional warfare, but it's also exactly what our defense grid was designed to counter. They're moving into a trap that's been 40 years in the making. Commander Vasquez added her own analysis. Our intelligence network has been feeding us information about Council military capabilities for decades. We know their ship designs, their tactical doctrines, their command structures, even their psychological profiles. They know almost nothing about our true capabilities. President Martinez was quiet for several moments, processing the information. Finally, he spoke. Admiral, I need to know, are we going to win this? Admiral Chun looked him directly in the eye. Mr. President, the Council fleet that's approaching our space represents the most powerful military force in known galactic history. They have weapons that can crack planets and defenses that have never been breached. Any conventional defense would be hopeless. She paused, then continued with absolute conviction. But we're not fighting a conventional war. When this is over, the galaxy is going to learn that humanity doesn't just refuse to bow to their authority. We refuse to fight by their rules. They mocked our warnings because they thought they knew what kind of enemy we would be. They're about to discover just how wrong they were. The communication ended, leaving the command center in focused silence. Around them, thousands of personnel continued their preparations, each playing their part in humanity's greatest gamble. In 18 days, the galaxy would learn that sometimes the young species that seemed weakest could deliver the hardest lessons of all. The Council Enforcement Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system with a precision that spoke of millennia of military experience. Senator Golrath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion, watching as his forces deployed into standard formation. 237 capital ships, each one a masterpiece of galactic military engineering, spread across space in perfect coordination. All vessels report ready status, announced Fleet Coordinator Zixeth, her mechanical voice carrying updates from across the battle group. Blockade formations established at hyperspace exit points. Long-range sensors are active. Target acquisition systems are online. Senator Golrath studied the tactical display with satisfaction. Kepler 442 contained 3 human colonies with a combined population of approximately 2 million. According to Council intelligence, it was one of humanity's more important systems, housing both agricultural worlds and industrial facilities. The perfect target for demonstrating the consequences of defying Council authority. Any response from the human settlements? He asked. Standard civilian communication frequencies show normal traffic patterns, reported the sensor operator, a six-armed Veltar whose aquatic nature required a specialized environmental suit. No military communications detected. No defensive fleet movement. Their orbital facilities appear to be operating normally. This was exactly what Golrath had expected. Young species often froze in terror when confronted with the full might of a Council enforcement fleet. The humans had probably never seen warships of this magnitude, let alone imagine that hundreds of them could appear in their space simultaneously. Open a communication channel to all human facilities in this system, Golrath commanded. Standard enforcement protocol. The massive holographic displays throughout his flagship showed the human colonies as they received his message. Agricultural installations on the primary world continued their operations. The orbital manufacturing stations maintained their regular production schedules. Even the deep space mining operations showed no signs of panic or military alert. People of the human colonies in this system, Golrath's voice boomed across all frequencies. You are in violation of Galactic Council territorial agreements. Your government has ignored repeated warnings and refused to acknowledge Council authority. You have 4 standard hours to evacuate all military personnel and surrender control of your facilities to Council peacekeeping forces. Compliance will result in minimal disruption to civilian populations. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force. The response came faster than expected. A middle-aged human man appeared on the communication screen, dressed in simple work clothes and speaking from what appeared to be a farm administrative building. His demeanor was calm, almost casual, as he addressed the most powerful military fleet in the galaxy. This is Governor Harrison of the Kepler 442 Colonial Authority, the human said. We've received your message and appreciate the courtesy of advance notice. However, I'm afraid we must decline your request for surrender. Our people have worked too hard building these communities to simply abandon them because of a bureaucratic dispute between our governments. Murmurs of astonishment rippled across the bridge. Golrath's scarred carapace darkened with anger. In over 50 enforcement actions, no civilian leader had ever responded with such casual defiance. Governor Harrison, Golrath replied, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Perhaps you do not understand your situation. The fleet currently surrounding your system contains enough firepower to reduce your entire civilization to atoms. This is not a bureaucratic dispute. This is a final warning. The human governor actually smiled. Senator Golrath, we know exactly who you are and what your fleet is capable of. We've been studying Council enforcement tactics for decades. We understand that you prefer to avoid unnecessary destruction and civilian casualties. We're counting on it. The communication ended before Golrath could respond. Around him, the bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances. This was not how enforcement actions typically proceeded. Sir, the tactical officer reported, long-range sensors are detecting some unusual readings from the asteroid belt in this system. Multiple objects with metallic signatures, but they don't match standard mining equipment or defensive platforms. Show me, Golrath commanded. The display zoomed in on the asteroid belt, revealing what appeared to be normal mining operations. Dozens of automated extraction platforms worked steadily among the rocky debris, their activities generating the usual electromagnetic signatures of industrial equipment. But there was something else, faint energy readings that didn't quite match known mining technology. Could be primitive defensive installations, suggested Fleet Coordinator Zixeth. Young species often attempt to hide weapons platforms among their industrial facilities. Golrath considered this. It was a common tactic, though usually ineffective against Council military technology. Begin detailed scans of all asteroid belt facilities. If the humans want to play games, we'll demonstrate why such tactics are futile. What the Council sensors couldn't detect were the true nature of those installations. Hidden among the asteroid mining platforms were weapons systems unlike anything in galactic military doctrine. Human engineers had spent decades developing what they called distributed offensive capabilities, weapons that could operate independently, communicate through quantum entanglement networks, and coordinate attacks across vast distances without generating detectable command signals. As the Council fleet positioned itself for a standard planetary blockade, those hidden systems were already tracking their movements, analyzing their formations, and preparing for activation sequences that would begin in exactly 3 hours and 47 minutes. On the surface of Kepler 442b, Governor Harrison walked through the underground command center that existed beneath every human colony. The cheerful farmer persona he had projected during the communication was replaced by the focused demeanor of a former Earth Defense Force colonel. Status report, he requested as he entered the tactical center. All defensive systems are green, reported Major Santos, the colony's actual military commander. Orbital platforms are tracking multiple targets. The grid is synchronized and ready for activation. Population evacuation to hardened shelters is 93% complete. Governor Harrison nodded. Like every human colony established since first contact with galactic civilization, Kepler 442 had been designed as both a civilian settlement and a military fortress. The agricultural facilities that the Council sensors detected were real, but they were built above underground manufacturing centers that had been producing advanced weapons for decades. The orbital stations that appeared to be simple industrial platforms were actually heavily armored defensive nodes equipped with technology that the Council had never encountered. Any word from Solar Command? Harrison asked. Admiral Chun confirms that all colonies are reporting ready status. Major Santos replied. The Council has committed their enforcement fleet exactly as predicted. Fleet composition matches our intelligence estimates. They're following standard doctrine. Harrison studied the tactical display, showing Council ship positions. They're positioning for a classic blockade and bombardment pattern. Perfect. How many of their ships are we expected to handle with our local grid? Current assignment is 37 capital ships and approximately 200 support vessels, Santos reported. Well within our defensive capacity, assuming the new weapons perform as designed. The new weapons were humanity's greatest secret. While galactic military technology focused on energy weapons and physical projectiles, human scientists had developed something entirely different. Weapons that manipulated the fundamental forces of physics themselves. Gravity-based systems that could crush starships regardless of their shielding. Quantum disruptors that could cause enemy weapons to malfunction by altering the basic constants of physics in localized areas. Time dilation fields that could slow enemy reactions while accelerating friendly responses. Most importantly, these weapons were built into the infrastructure of every human colony. The asteroid mining platforms weren't just hiding weapons. They were weapons capable of coordinating attacks across light years of space with perfect timing. The orbital facilities weren't just defensive platforms. They were nodes in a network that could focus the combined defensive power of dozens of systems against any target. Governor, came a report from the communication station. We're receiving the Council's final demand. 1 hour to surrender or face bombardment. Harrison smiled grimly. Send them our standard response. Then begin final countdown procedures. The message that went out to Senator Golrath was simple and polite. Thank you for your patience. We remain committed to defending our homes and communities. We hope this can be resolved without unnecessary violence. What the message didn't say was that in 57 minutes, the Council enforcement fleet would discover that humanity had never intended to fight a defensive war. The young species that had mocked the Council's warnings was about to demonstrate that some lessons could only be taught through overwhelming force, and that sometimes the student becomes the teacher. The first sign that something was wrong came from the Savage Wind, a hegemony heavy cruiser positioned on the outer edge of the Council formation. Fleet Coordinator Zixeth was reviewing standard bombardment patterns when a ship's emergency beacon activated, followed immediately by a communication that sent shock waves through the entire fleet. Fleet Command, this is Captain Mordax of the Savage Wind. We are experiencing complete systems failure. All primary and secondary power systems are offline. Gravity generators are malfunctioning. Life support is operating on emergency backup only. We are dead in space. Senator Golrath stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The Savage Wind had been operating normally just moments before. There had been no incoming fire, no energy signatures indicating attack, no warning of any kind. The massive warship had simply stopped functioning. "This is impossible," Golrath growled. "Run full diagnostics. Check for computer viruses, sabotage, anything that could explain this malfunction." Before Fleet Coordinator Zixeth could respond, more emergency beacons began lighting up across the tactical display. The Void Runner Destroyer Death's Edge reported complete weapons system failure. The Zephyrian battlecruiser Wind of Victory found its navigation systems completely non-responsive. Within minutes, over 30 Council ships were reporting critical malfunctions with no identifiable cause. "Senator," reported the sensor operator, his voice tight with concern, "I'm detecting unusual energy patterns throughout the asteroid belt. The readings are unlike anything in our databases." The tactical display shifted to show the belt in detail. What had appeared to be standard mining operations was revealing itself as something far more sophisticated. The metallic signatures that had seemed like equipment were moving with obvious intelligence, repositioning themselves in patterns that spoke of military coordination. "Those aren't mining platforms," Golrath realized with growing alarm. "They're weapons. The humans have been hiding weapons throughout the entire system." As if responding to his words, the hidden installations revealed themselves fully. Across dozens of asteroids, massive structures unfolded from concealed positions. But these weren't conventional weapons. They were unlike anything in galactic military history. Instead of energy cannons or missile launchers, they projected fields of distorted space-time that reached out across impossible distances to touch Council ships with invisible fingers. The effect was immediate and devastating. Ships that had served the Council for centuries found their basic systems failing as the fundamental constants of physics were altered in localized areas around their hulls. Fusion reactors shut down as nuclear forces were dampened. Computer cores malfunctioned as electromagnetic interactions were disrupted. Even life support systems failed as the chemical processes that sustained alien biologies were thrown into chaos. "All ships, emergency maneuvers," Golrath commanded. "Break formation and establish defensive perimeter around the Eternal Dominion. All weapons systems target those asteroid installations." The surviving Council ships that still retained maneuvering capability began firing massive volleys at the revealed human positions. Energy beams that could vaporize mountains struck the asteroid-mounted weapons, only to be absorbed by defensive fields that bent the attacks around their targets like water flowing around stones. "Senator," Fleet Commander Zixeth reported, her mechanical voice carrying notes of confusion and fear, "our weapons are having no effect. The human installations are protected by some kind of spatial distortion field. Our targeting systems cannot achieve weapon locks. Even worse, the human weapons were adapting to the Council's tactics with terrifying speed. Ships that attempted to maneuver out of range found themselves caught in gravity wells that appeared from nowhere, dragging them back into the kill zones. Vessels that tried to establish defensive formations discovered that their shields were useless against attacks that bypassed conventional defenses entirely. The Iron Judgment, a massive Void Runner dreadnought, attempted to ram one of the asteroid installations in a desperate attack. The ship accelerated to full speed, its crew preparing for a glorious death that would at least destroy one of the human weapons. Instead, they found themselves caught in a time dilation field that slowed their approach to a crawl while the human installation calmly repositioned itself out of their path. "This is not possible," Golrath repeated, but with growing desperation rather than disbelief. "No species develops this level of technology this quickly. It takes millennia to achieve such capabilities." The answer came from an unexpected source. Governor Harrison's calm voice filled the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, broadcast on all frequencies so that every surviving Council ship could hear his words. "Senator Golrath, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about humanity's technological development. You assumed we followed the same path as other species, gradual improvement of existing technologies over long periods of time. But humanity has always approached problems differently. The holographic display showed Governor Harrison standing in what was obviously a sophisticated command center, surrounded by displays that showed the tactical situation in real time. His expression remained calm and reasonable, as if he were discussing crop yields rather than the systematic destruction of the most powerful fleet in galactic history. "You see," Harrison continued, "when humans discovered that faster-than-light travel was possible, our scientists didn't just copy existing designs. They developed entirely new approaches based on human mathematical and engineering principles. When we learned about galactic civilization, we didn't try to fit into your existing frameworks. We studied your strengths and weaknesses and developed technologies specifically designed to counter your advantages." Another wave of Council ships fell silent as their systems succumbed to weapons that attacked the very laws of physics that governed their operation. The carefully organized fleet formation was dissolving into scattered groups of damaged vessels, their crews struggling with equipment that no longer functioned according to known principles. "The weapons we're using against you don't exist in your military databases because we invented them specifically for this conflict," Harrison explained. "Gravity manipulation technology that can create localized effects anywhere within a star system. Quantum field disruptors that can selectively alter how matter and energy interact in specific areas. Temporal distortion generators that can speed up or slow down processes at the molecular level." Golrath realized with growing horror that humanity hadn't just been preparing to fight the Council. They had been preparing to fight the Council using weapons and tactics that made conventional defenses useless. Every aspect of galactic military doctrine, refined over thousands of years, was being rendered obsolete by technologies that shouldn't exist. But this was just one system, Golrath growled, trying to maintain his composure. "You may have surprised us here, but the Council has thousands of ships. We can adapt." "We can." His words were cut off as reports began flooding in from across Council space. The communication channels lit up with emergency signals from dozens of different systems. The human colonies that had seemed so vulnerable and isolated were revealing themselves as nodes in a vast military network that spanned hundreds of light years. Every human settlement was simultaneously activating defensive systems that made the Kepler 442 installation look modest by comparison. The scattered, vulnerable colonies that the Council had planned to pick off one by one were actually fortified positions in a strategic network that had been designed to trap and destroy entire fleets. "You never understood what you were facing," Governor Harrison said, his voice carrying a note of almost paternal disappointment. "You thought you were dealing with a primitive species that had gotten lucky with FTL technology. But humanity has been preparing for this confrontation since the moment we learned that galactic civilization was controlled by an organization that demanded absolute obedience." The tactical display now showed the true scope of the disaster. Of the 237 capital ships that had entered the Kepler 442 system with such confidence, fewer than 60 retained any combat capability. The rest were either completely disabled or destroyed by weapons that defied every known principle of galactic military science. "This is your final warning, Senator," Harrison concluded. "Withdraw your forces immediately, or we will continue our defensive operations until your entire fleet is eliminated. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. Our patience is not unlimited." Senator Golrath stared at the ruins of his fleet and realized that the galaxy was about to learn a lesson that it would never forget. The young species that had mocked the Council's authority hadn't been foolish or ignorant. They had been preparing to teach the galaxy that some students were destined to become masters. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 6 standard hours after the first reports from the Kepler 442 system reached Nexus Prime. High Counselor Vex High's crystalline form flickered through color patterns that indicated severe distress as representatives from 47 species filled the chamber with agitated communication. The holographic displays showed the aftermath of what many were already calling the greatest military disaster in recorded galactic history. Of Senator Golrath's mighty enforcement fleet, only 43 ships had managed to escape the Kepler 442 system, and most of those were heavily damaged. Nearly 200 capital ships, vessels that had taken decades to construct and represented the pinnacle of galactic military technology, have been reduced to floating scrap metal by weapons that shouldn't exist. Senator Golrath himself stood at the center of the chamber, his scarred carapace now bearing fresh marks from his flagship's emergency evacuation. His voice carried none of its former confidence as he delivered his report to the assembled council. The humans did not simply defeat our enforcement action, he began, his words causing ripples of disturbed communication throughout the chamber. They demonstrated technological capabilities that render our entire understanding of warfare obsolete. Their weapons operate on principles that our scientists cannot explain. They can disable our ships without causing visible damage. They can manipulate gravity, time, and space itself as weapons of war. Ambassador Keth Moore of the hegemony rose from his seat, his 6 arms gesturing in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. This is impossible. No species achieves such technological advancement in mere decades. Our intelligence reports confirmed that humans achieved FDL travel only 50 years ago. They should be centuries behind our capabilities. Our intelligence was flawed, Golrath replied grimly. The humans allowed us to see what they wanted us to see, while we observed their civilian settlements and commercial activities. They were constructing a military network unlike anything in galactic history. Every colony is a fortress. Every mining operation is a weapons platform. Every trade ship is a potential warship. The chamber erupted in chaotic communication as the implications sank in. Species that had felt secure under council protection for millennia suddenly realized that their safety had been an illusion. If humans could destroy the council's enforcement fleet so easily, what did that mean for the rest of galactic civilization? Counselor Nixera of the Technical Guild activated her analytical displays. I've been studying the limited sensor data from the engagement. The human weapons appear to manipulate fundamental forces at the quantum level. They can selectively alter how matter and energy interact within specific areas of space. This suggests a level of scientific understanding that exceeds our own by several orders of magnitude. High Counselor Vexai's light patterns shifted to a deep purple, indicating formal analysis mode. If this assessment is correct, then we face an unprecedented situation. For the first time in Council history, we have encountered a species with military capabilities that surpass our own. The revelation sent shock waves through the chamber. The Council's authority had been based on their technological superiority for over 3,000 years. Every enforcement action, every territorial dispute, every diplomatic negotiation had been conducted from a position of overwhelming strength. The idea that a young species could develop superior capabilities was almost incomprehensible. There must be some explanation, insisted Ambassador Velthor of the Zephyrian Empire, his feathered crest displaying patterns of denial and confusion. Perhaps they discovered ancient technology. Perhaps they had assistance from unknown alien civilizations. Species do not develop such capabilities independently. Senator Golrath activated a communication recording that silenced the chamber instantly. It was the final message from Governor Harrison, broadcast as the Council fleet fled the Kepler 442 system in defeat. Members of the Galactic Council, the human's calm voice filled the chamber. I hope today's events have helped clarify humanity's position regarding territorial disputes and Council authority. We have no desire for conquest or domination, but we will not bow to threats or intimidation from any source. The recording continued, and Harrison's next word struck at the very foundations of galactic civilization. Furthermore, we wish to inform you that today's demonstration was conducted using approximately 12% of our total defensive capability. We chose to limit our response to minimize casualties and demonstrate our desire for a peaceful resolution to this conflict. Gasps and expressions of alarm rippled through the chamber. 12%. The humans had destroyed the most powerful fleet in galactic history using only a fraction of their military capability. We remain open to diplomatic negotiations, Harrison continued. But future discussions will be conducted between equals, not between a council of overlords and their subjects. Humanity claims the right to expand explore, and develop without interference from organizations that we did not choose to join and whose authority we do not recognize. The recording ended with words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. We suggest that future council policies take into account the reality that not all species will accept domination, regardless of how overwhelming your perceived advantages might be. Some of us prefer to make our own choices about our destiny. High Counselor Vexai processed the implications for several long moments before addressing the chamber. We appear to have three options before us. We can attempt to marshal the full military might of all council species for a larger enforcement action. We can seek a diplomatic solution that accommodates human territorial claims. Or we can accept that the balance of power in the galaxy has fundamentally changed. The vote that followed was unlike any in council history. Instead of the unanimous decisions that had characterized previous enforcement actions, the chamber split into bitter factions. Some species demanded immediate retaliation regardless of cost. Others called for negotiations and compromise. A growing number suggested that perhaps it was time to reconsider the Council's entire approach to galactic governance. During the debates, reports continued to arrive from across human space. Every Council ship that approached a human system encountered the same devastating defensive capabilities. Probe ships were disabled without being destroyed. Scout vessels found themselves trapped in fields that prevented FDL travel. Even long-range sensors were blocked by technologies that made human space effectively invisible to Council observation. Most disturbing of all were the reports from human settlements in Council space. The restaurants, entertainment venues, and trading posts that had become popular throughout the galaxy were quietly closing their operations. Human merchants were withdrawing from trade networks that had become dependent on their goods and services. The intelligence network that humanity had built through peaceful commerce was transforming into an economic weapon that left entire sectors struggling with shortages and disruptions. 3 months after the Kepler 442 disaster, High Counselor Vexai stood once again before the assembled council. But this time, his announcement would reshape galactic civilization forever. After extensive deliberation, the Council has voted to extend formal recognition to the Human Colonial Federation as a sovereign galactic power, he announced, his crystalline form displaying patterns of reluctant acceptance. Territorial negotiations will commence immediately, mediated by neutral parties and conducted according to principles of mutual respect and equality. The decision marked the end of an era. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had ruled through superior technology and overwhelming force. The young species that had mocked their warnings had taught them that true strength sometimes came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when destruction was unnecessary. As human delegates prepared to attend their first council session as equals rather than subjects, the galaxy began to adapt to a new reality. The species that had seemed weakest had proven strongest when it mattered most. They had ensured their heavy reckoning not through conquest or domination, but by demonstrating that some lessons could only be learned through experience, and that sometimes the best teachers were those who refused to accept that certain things were impossible. The Galactic Council would continue to govern much of known space, but never again would they assume that age and experience were substitutes for innovation and determination. Humanity had earned their place among the stars, not by asking permission, but by proving that they belonged there regardless of what anyone else thought. And across human space, in colonies that had seemed so vulnerable just months before, people looked up at stars that no longer represented distant dreams, but infinite possibilities. The galaxy had learned to respect them, and now it was time to explore what that respect could accomplish when combined with human ingenuity and the unwavering belief that no authority had the right to limit how far humanity could reach.